So let's move on to the first topic, which is, of course, anti-trans group maps out trans services, encouraging violence. This came to the front on the 13th of February 2021 when a Twitter account by the name of Gender Mapper was started. And they put out their first tweet, which read as, quote, "My map is the number one source for gender affirmative care. Who is doing what to whom? Hashtag no puberty blockers for children," end quote. Now, various Twitter users were very quick to note the similarities between what Gender Mapper was doing and what we've seen previously with Christian terrorism, specifically that targeted towards abortion providers and said healthcare users. So for those who don't know, particularly in the US, when it comes to abortion, it's particularly nasty, various evangelical, though I believe other sects do get involved with it as well, but it's primarily the white evangelicals, will map out like it's not just the abortion centers or places that offer abortion, it's also the homes of doctors who are the ones that actually do the procedures. They map out all this information, they put it out there, and they continue to talk about how these terrible people are killing babies and they need to be stopped, and it will be God's, righteous hand that comes down on them eventually, which leads to numerous assaults, fire bombings, shootings, constant terror. That's what it is. Some people say it's like stochastic terrorism, but once you've actually started mapping where these people live out, it's no longer random. It is coordinated. This is just plain old terrorism that these people are pushing for. That has been started up in relation to trans youth and the people who support trans youth. So this map was a digital map hosted on Google, and it showed all the places that were trans inclusive, ones that were offering trans youth healthcare, and the intent was pretty clear. It was to do the exact same thing, either in hopes that enough of these people would be taken out, or that they would be, people would see this, the practitioners would see this, and they become too afraid to do the procedure or to offer these services, I should say. It's not really one procedure. It's not the same as abortion in that regard. So, it's pretty clear what is going on here. As it turns out, the map did not belong to Gender Mapper, but was actually the work of a trans person, Erin from Erin in the Morn, who had put together the resource to help trans folk and the parents of trans children find supportive healthcare providers. This is in the States specifically. Gender Mapper had come along, stolen their data, changed a couple of terms, and reposted. And Erin was pointing out how even the visuals were exactly the same. So it had the signatures that it'd been stolen from their map all over it. Thankfully, on the 16th of February, the actual map put out by Gender Mapper was taken down by Google. So this is the map that Gender Mapper were using to try and encourage violence, was taken down by Google. Whether this was for copyright reasons or a violation of the terms of service is unknown, though from Evan's tweet, it seems that there's some suggestion that it was more about copyright than actual, a violation of terms of service in encouraging terrorism. But either way, they're without a map now. Sadly, as is usually the case these days, Twitter has just refused to take action. In spite of numerous people reporting the account, receiving confirmation that their tweets had violated terms of services, the account itself remains up, pumping out all the usual hate. It just lacks the Google Maps service that they were previously using. This is fucking terrifying. I talked in, I think the previous show, I was talking about how in the UK, a law designed to stop child predators and rapists from adopting a new identity the effect of it is it's actually going to out not just trans folk who are transitioning, but it's going to make it so victims of domestic abuse who are trying to flee their partners are now going to have to like post their name in a public article which will be archived and therefore make them always trackable. I talked about how that was scary enough, like the idea that someone could just come across, find information on either, you know, a trans person transitioning or a victim of domestic abuse that they've been trying to hunt down, and that will result in violence there. This is a coordinated effort. Like, the malice and hatred that sort of went into this. I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to add. Like, this seems to have taken things to an entirely new level. We've all seen like the clips of various transphobes like saying that that I would punch a trans person, you know, if they ever came up to me, sort of thing. We've all seen that, but this is active terrorism going on. Like, and here's the thing: it's probably gonna work. Like, I could not imagine if I was one of the service providers who found out that, you know, I'd appeared on what's effectively a hit list, you know. And there's also the fact that, again, the data was taken from Erin's list, and Erin put this list together in good faith to try and help trans youth, you know. And that list was taken and was torn out and was being used to encourage violence against healthcare providers and the trans youth who require what is life-saving support, you know, whether it be social, legal, or medical transition. It is life-saving support, you know. Just the fact that they would take something that was created for the betterment of trans youth lives and corrupt it in such a way is absolutely horrific. I'm sorry, I asked you a question and I think I cut you off there. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I that needed to be said because
I hope Erin like realizes that they're not to blame for this. You know.
No, absolutely not.
Because again, I just can't imagine how fucking horrible it would feel to be in that situation. You know.
We've been put into a no-win situation here where the information needs to be somewhere. You know, we need to be able to find the services we need, but that's going to be used. You know.
And with Erin, like, she's such a wonderful person. She's doing all this free work, you know. She's compiling this list to help people, and then just to have it stolen, and yeah. I did check her Twitter feed earlier today, and I just did it again just now. I've not seen any update on it. So, yeah. It seems like the map's been removed and it's just stayed down. But sadly, the Twitter account and the people behind this, they're still at large. They could do this at any point. They could always create a new account, re-upload the same map. Like, how are you meant to fight this unless, like, the police step up and do something? And they're not going to do that. They don't give a crap about us. No. We're not billionaire bourgeoisie people, you know. These are trans people who are the most among the most economic disadvantaged, particularly if they're an intersection of disability, black, and being trans. You know. And that's the thing. The people who are going to benefit most from a free web service like this that lets people know here's the places that you can go, are the people who can't afford, you know, the super duper insurance things where we take care of everything. You know, it's going to be those people who are going to benefit the most, and they're the ones that the police are going to give the least shits about. So
this makes me angry, right? Because if they lose, literally nothing bad happens to them. If transphobes lose, nothing bad happens because trans people are not actually hurting anyone, contrary to what they keep pushing. They're fine either way.
Mhm.
If we lose, we die.
Yeah.
So they're just killing us for no reason. They're turning every little good thing we do against us for no fucking reason.
Mhm. And like this opens
I
questions about like all other future activities that we try to do to like bring attention to certain things. How are they going to turn that on us? You know. Um,
They're fucking with our mutual aid, and that's terrifying. And I just I need to state this. This they they say this in the tweet that this is over puberty blockers,
mhm.
which literally don't do anything. As in, literally, their entire purpose is to make a thing not happen for a bit.
Mhm.
It's
Yes, yeah. Like puberty blockers are the compromise. Everyone put on puberty blockers has gone on to hormonally transition. Um, this is in the Netherlands, the Dutch study there. Every youth put on puberty blockers has gone on to transition hormonally because the professionals found differences between youth that would persist and youth that would desist that could be used to like
this
gauge
screen with
not
a ridiculously high degree of accuracy.
not who is and isn't trans. That's not necessarily what they figured out, but who would benefit from medical transition. That's the thing that I need to be clear on, because I also feel like that sometimes gets lost. Like the people who desist, quite a few of them are still trans. They go on to transition both legally and socially. They just don't want to do it medically, and that's a great thing. That is what like bodily autonomy when it comes to these services should be about. What benefits the patient? What do they want? How can we make sure they understand these things? And yeah, so. Yes, it is intended to halt the normalization of trans visibility and thereby trans acceptance. Thank you, Linda. That, like, again, it's to force everyone underground. That's what it is.
And of course, they say that it's about these quote unquote dangerous medical interventions. But then when trans people don't medically transition, just want to socially and legally transition, that's not good
then
enough
they're just a
either.
man in a dress if it's a trans woman, particularly, or it's
Yeah.
just a girl seeking attention if it's a trans man.
Or for non-binary people,
It can go either way. It can be both in the same conversation. They can be both victim and violent aggressor at the same time, and not in like a nuanced way, just like all out whatever to hate them sort of way. So, you know, it's and that's the thing. It reminds me of the fact that like the people who, and I'm sorry to always bring this back to athletics and everything like that, you know, the bigots, like, oh, they compromised and said, yeah, actually, you know, if they've been on puberty blockers since they were a teenager, then I'm fine with them, you know, taking part in these sports. Then they fight tooth and nail to block that access at, you know, a young age, to effectively ensure that they can't then. So it makes them seem reasonable, but that's because they're undermining the system at a different location to ensure that that standard they agreed to never comes into play.
It's like, oh, I'm not telling you you can't do the thing anymore. I'm saying that you can just as long as you have the token. Okay, can I have the token? No, I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you from getting the token. I'm reasonable. Yes.
Vanitra. I don't know if this is an appropriate point to also add, but since you're talking about the map thing, trying to scare providers, it might also be worth noting that doctors already take huge risks. I don't know how it's supposed to continue the sentence. I'll come back to that if it does, but again, like, the toxicity around supplying trans people their healthcare is just, it is,
Yeah.
it's wrong. We all get it's wrong, but it's also so out of proportion for anything else, like comparable. That it's just, but that's the way of transphobia. You know, it's reasoned
This
and proportioned are not words they particularly care about.
this account, by the way, Gender Mapper, I looked through some of their other tweets, and they're a huge piece of shit, massive. There's like all these posts about, oh, I used to be trans, and then I realized I was wrong, and I detransitioned, and I was hurt by the blah blah blah, and it annoys me because first of all, we have no way of verifying any of these testimonies. You know, anyone can write some words on a thing. But second, it's only after the testimonies of the people who say they were hurt and who desisted and whatever,
Not the vast majority whose life was improved.
detransitioned, who are listened to. But then people like us who say, you know, we're definitely trans. We're not going back on this. We're not listened to. It's always, oh, you'll change your mind.
It's the same thing about sexuality, you know. That's the common thing there as well. It's just a phase. Everyone just clenched their muscles and was like cringing at that. Yes, anyway, the comment does continue. I'll read it out in full. I don't know if this is an appropriate point to also add, but since you're talking about the map thing trying to scare providers, it might also be worth noting that doctors already take huge risks taking on trans patients in their employment at hospitals who do not want trans people around their cis patients. I'm trying to think of how to link that in. But yeah, I can kind of get like being trans and being in a healthcare profession, that fucking suck. Not because it has to suck, but because of how society is trained to treat trans people. Because it is training, it is social conditioning, it's not innate, it's not inherent. You know, people aren't born hating trans people, they're taught. That's why every time a family laughs at, you know, a man in a dress in a TV show, a trans child becomes a little less likely to come out.
And a cis child becomes a little more likely to commit coordinated terrorism against the trans child.
Yeah, that's... we trained from a young age. Charles Landsberg, I detransitioned to be safe, and I'm retransitioning now, and you never hear those people... and you never hear these people talk about people like me. Yeah, and that's the thing, when you look at the number of detransitioners, that is the case. They detransitioned for safety reasons. A lot of trans people have sadly been left to believe by those who propagate the gospel of cis assimilationism, Blair White, Rose of Dawn, Calvin Gower, that if you transition, medically typically, you will be accepted by cis society and everything will be wonderful. And that's not the case. You know, you can end up losing your family, your friends, etc., your job even, and you might say, oh, there's like protections, you can't just fire someone for being trans. They will find a way. They will find a way. And then the onus is on you to prove that it was because... Excuse me.
So here's the thing: is they never fire you for being trans, but they'll fire you for you were late to work too often, or
we just need to shrink down the team and like your dead baggage or whatever. You know, they'll come up with some excuse.
Which reminds me of a certain person who, you know, doesn't target trans people. No, never. It's just pushes back against these abusive people with personality disorders who are mentally ill and all just happen to be trans. Mm-hmm. But it's not because they're trans, it's just because they're abusive.
And then
a
few of them
we've uncovered so far. Just quickly, the theme we've uncovered so far is that when people are bigoted They are very obviously directly bigoted, but they're never going to say it outright. They're always going to come up with some sort of excuse. It's not elaborate or clever. They just say different words.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's not because you're trans. It's just because you're abusive. Oh, it's not because you're trans. It's just because we need to cut down the team. Oh, it's not because you're trans. It's because you went through the puberty that I forced you to go through.
So yeah, it's a really it's a really horrible case all around, and like I wish some action would be taken against these people. They should be facing prison time for this sort of action, for actually encouraging terrorist acts and terrorist violence. Yeah, that should have something come with it, but it's in the US. I don't think it would be any different here if it was in the UK. Here in the UK, or not in the UK. I don't think it would be any different if it were in the UK. But again, it's in the US. They were told repeatedly that this sort of like, you know, evangelical white crime was the main source of terror in the US. They don't give a shit. It's all about the brown people, you know, and that continues. Joe Biden promised to stop deportations for at least the first 100 days if he was elected to office. ICE told him fuck off. He told them go right ahead then. You know, it is just a fucked system. And that is bleak. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. It's going really bleak.
Writing Robin says, and they'll also not fire people for being discriminatory against trans people, even in the field of home health aides. And that's also true. They will fire you just for being trans, but if someone treats you like absolute shit because you're trans, they're not going to get fired. And then the few instances where they're not even fired, but just like their contracts aren't renewed, there's of course a massive uproar. You know, trans folks have to be protected in the workplace. Trans people have to be fired. That is the world we live in right
now. Take care, Landsberg. Thank you for joining us. Anyway, so yes, shall we move on to the next topic?
One thing I just want to say quickly is I want to spare for disabled trans people, some of whom are like treated like absolute shit by the people taking care of them and don't have their identities respected, and can't do anything about it because both our trans society is both incredibly transphobic and incredibly ableist. It's absolutely terrible.